Good morning, everybody. I'm recording this video on a Friday. This is the last video I gotta record for this week. So let's make this a good one. In this video, I want to go over my 2024 NFL Draft Board 3.0, where I'm going to be giving my my prospect grades for the wide receiver and tight end class, as you can see on this side of the screen. Now, I want to quickly go over the 2024 NFL Draft Board, the rules, and what essentially my draft board is. First, I've got 266 total players on my draft board. I'm probably going to hit the 270 mark once I hit the offensive line and defense. You've got the blue chip prospects in blue. You got early first round grades. And, but actually, before I get into the grades, I forgot. These grades are not a projection. They're not a projection of where these players are going to go. They are my views on the prospect. They're how good I think they are as a prospect, and according from a whole bunch of factors such as film, statistics, how the industry views them, and what I've heard from them, and basically what I've seen from them, whether that's from live games or from the film tape. So, blue chip prospects, and everybody in blue is essentially a first round grade. These are the guys that I think definitively are first round talents and will give first round production. And then you got the second round guys. These will be starters in the league. Then you have third round grades, you have fourth round grades, and then you have the fifth, sixth, and seventh, all color coded. Everybody's color coded. And then an undrafted. I think I only have one or two undrafted players in this video. However, if you guys didn't see, I already had my 2.0 update, which was my quarterbacks and halfback rankings. But quickly before, I think that the wide receiver class is the best position group in the class. So I'm very excited for this video. And then the tight end class as well in the top 7. So, quick things before also. If I'm looking over to the left side of my screen, it is because I have my statistics and all my notes over here for the wide receiver class. So if I look over there a lot, that's why. And then also, if you guys want the link is in my Patreon, Alex Regan NFL. You could find the link in the description. And the board is free if you want to get access to it. I made it free recently. So let's start off with this wide receiver class. Obviously, I think this is arguably a generational wide receiver class. I think we could see a few Pro Bowlers possibly. And it's all headed by one man, Marvin Harrison Jr. Dude is a beast. 6'3", 209 pounds at the combine. He had 1,200 receiving yards last year and 14 touchdowns. He won the Biletnikoff. He is just a perfectly built receiver. Dude is basically built in a lab. Great releases off of the line of scrimmage. Great route runner, even for his size. He's such a fluid player. He's got incredible body control. He's a fade ball master. I think that Marvin Harrison Jr. is just simply the best wide receiver prospect I've ever seen. Really close with Ja'Marr Chase in my eyes. In terms of prospect value, obviously he is my number 1 player in this entire class. But then you have Malik Nabers, who's my number 5 player in this class. Malik Nabers is incredible as well. 6 foot 200 pounds, didn't go to the combine. However, he's super young at 20 years old, had 89 receptions, 1,592 yards, and 14 touchdowns at LSU this year. This dude is such a excellently balanced receiver in so many aspects. Phenomenal after the catch, great speed, great body control, good enough as a contested catch receiver, fights through contact, can run short, intermediate, and long routes. He's an excellent player at all 3 levels of the field, short, intermediate, deep. And I mean, Nabers, I wish he did do something at the combine, like run his times, because it is a little bit unknown what his exact size and athletic traits are. But based on the film, Malik Nabers, I already released my prospect breakdown on him. Really like Malik Nabers. And then Rome Odunze is just so close behind them. It really is 1A, 1B, 1C. If we looked at any other classes, I think Rome Odunze would have been the 1 last year. He arguably would have been the 1 in 2022 as well. Same thing could be said about Nabers. Rome Odunze is just one of the smoothest overall players in this entire draft class. I mean, the over-the-shoulder tracking ability is arguably one of one, especially within this class. You've got 75% contested catch rate. He led the FBS in receiving yards at 1,640. You also had 13 touchdowns. It had a 9.91 RAS score from the combine. Dude is a very good receiver who can play within the slot, the boundary. He could do whatever. The same thing can be said about Neighbors and Harrison. They're all versatile receivers and bigger receivers who could literally play everywhere. I think that these receivers could all be Pro Bowlers at one point of their career. That is not a stretch, too much of a stretch. But then we could look at the next three, which are I have 6 first-round grades in this wide receiver class, and then you have the next 3 coming up, which are A.D. Mitchell, Brian Thomas Jr., and Ladd McConkey. A.D. Mitchell, in my opinion, is the clear 4 in this wide receiver class because we could look at the production, and it's a little bit less because he did have 55 receptions, 845 receiving yards, and 11 touchdowns, but a ton of the stuff he just pops on tape. And he popped at the combine as well. I'll start off with the tape. He runs away from guys. He's a phenomenal route runner and he starts and stops at such a quick time. He has a crazy high vertical that shows up on tape. He just jumps over guys. Great hands. And then I mentioned the route running as well. But he's a fluid, smooth receiver at running routes. Reminds me a little bit of CeeDee Lamb per se. But he also had a 4.34 40 time at the combine, and he led all wide receivers in RAS, in relative athletic score, which is puts you up against relative athletes that also did the combine. He was a 9.98 RAS, which was first. I think that's among the draft class. He was tied with guys like Theo Johnson, who also had a 9.98. But that basically means he's a 99th percentile athlete for the wide receiver position. A.D. Mitchell is also within my top, I want to say 16 or 17 players within this class. I think he is 18 right now on my board, and he could arguably have been higher. I think he has a good chance to go within the top 15 in the draft. And then you've got Brian Thomas Jr., who's another phenomenal player. He had 17 touchdowns, which led the FBS for all receivers, along with 1,177 receiving yards on 68 receptions. He's another guy. On tape, he is a straight line, just rocket. He flat out runs away from guys, especially on go routes. On tape, LSU only really ran him on straight routes or straight back routes, like comebacks, curls, hitches, and then go routes. He ran all those routes at a 66, or all 66% of his routes were either on a straight line or straight down. But Brian Thomas Jr. made so much worth of that, and also he was a 4.33 40 time for wide receivers, which is great at 6'3", 209 pounds. Also, 9.97 RAS scoring, which was second in the class. And then you've got Ladd McConkey, who is the best route runner in this draft class. Well, there are two different types of route running. You could either be smooth and be fundamental and understand how to run routes and how to lead cornerbacks in a specific way to get open or find soft areas of the zone, or you could just be a straight technician and just separate from guys. Ladd McConkey has got phenomenal ankle flexibility. He's smooth running routes. He's really quick off of the line of scrimmage, and his short and intermediate game is crazy. And then also the ankle flexion really makes him cut on a dime. Even though his production was really, really low at Georgia throughout his career, his max yards, it was in 2022 with like 700. This year, only played 9 games, so he did have only 30 receptions, 478 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. But Ladd McConkey is one of the best short and intermediate players in this class for the wide receivers especially, and as a route runner. Shows up on tape a lot. He runs routes really well, and he has such a nuanced, defined route tree. But he also ran a 4.39, but he didn't go on a ton of straight line go routes at Georgia. But that 4.39 time, if you want to go and run him on a deep route, you definitely can. Then we're moving on to just a bunch of other really good wide receivers that I like a ton in this class. Obviously, I have 13 day 1 or round 2 minimum guys. I've got 18 day 1 or 2 wide receivers. That's how just good I think the class is, as well as having 35 total wide receivers. We'll start off with the second round guys with Troy Franklin. The thing about Franklin is, I guess I'll start off with a bit of a negative. He doesn't play through contact the best, and he also does drop the ball at a semi-high rate. He had a 10% drop rate in 2023, as also being 176 pounds and not playing the best through contact, and is not a contested catch guy at all. I think he only had a 30% contested catch rate on only like 10 contested targets. However, He had 81 receptions at Oregon, 1,383 receiving yards and 14 touchdowns, as well as having a 4.41 40 time at the combine. Good athlete as well. The thing about Franklin is he is more of like a crossers, a go route kind of guy, and an after the catch runner. Maybe not the sharpest cut kind of guy. It takes him a little bit to turn the corner. However, great after the catch. Good, really good speed, really good top end speed, especially game speed, and you can't argue with the production. And he was always open on crossing routes, and he's also pretty good in the short and intermediate. But Tez Johnson was more of that short and intermediate separator at Oregon last year. And then you got Xavier Legette, or Legette, however you want to pronounce it. Xavier Legette is a phenomenal just hands guy. He's got really, really, really strong and secure hands, and his catch radius is really, really wide, which makes him come down with a ton of really difficult catches. But the thing about Legette, 71 receptions, 1,255 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns. Also ran at the combine a 4.39 40 time and at a 9.92 relative athletic score, which is third for all wide receivers. Xavier Legette is also 6'1", 221 pounds, running a 4.39 at that weight and at that size and bulk. He's a really bulky receiver. It's crazy. But the thing about him is the route tree is a bit limited. So he's kind of more of a straight line guy, or just throw it up there and kind of just let him go. A good comparison at the NFL level is kind of a DK Metcalf style and build of a receiver. But again, Xavier Legette and Franklin, I have as early first round guys. And then I would say these three, Coleman, Worthy, and Tez Walker, are my mid second round guys. I'm going to start off with Keon Coleman. I know a lot of people are really, really low on him. I am not super low on Coleman because he, again, same thing with Legette, he has phenomenal hands and a very wide catch radius, as well as having really good size at 6'3", 213 pounds. He's only 20 years old. But at FSU this year, only 50 receptions, 658 receiving yards, and 11 touchdowns. And he also only ran a 4.61 40 time at the combine. However, he did have the top miles per hour in the catching drill, the straight line, just catch, drop, that stuff, which is a really good sign. His game speed is faster than the 40 time would lead on to be. It kind of is like a 4.5, but at that size, at 6'3", 213 pounds, that's pretty good, as well as him having a really good hands, contested catch radius, and contested catch ability. We saw that at Michigan State. However, when he went to FSU, Jordan Travis isn't the best at putting the ball in a really good spot for contested catch receivers, like throwing it up. Also, Jordan Travis doesn't have the best deep, he doesn't have the strongest arm or the best arm. So Keon Coleman a bit suffered from that, as well as being the number 2 in a FSU group with Johnny Wilson, who I will get to later. But I think Keon Coleman is much more talented a receiver. I just think the situation didn't benefit him a lot, as well as him having a bit of a limited route tree, which is why people are a bit really low on Keon Coleman. But I do have him at 9. And then Xavier Worthy, obviously, is going to be my number 10 receiver. He had a 4.21 40, which broke the combine record. That's really cool and all. But I want to get to the other stuff with him. He's 5'11", 165 pounds. And if you don't know, I'm around that weight as well as being 5'10". So he's a pretty similar stature to a guy like me, if you want to put that in relativity. However, this dude is blazing fast. On tape, and as a punt returner, he just flat out runs away from guys. It's really hard to catch up to him as well, because he just has another gear. 65 receptions, 1,014 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns. He did run a ton of. He really was a screen man. Texas really made him run a ton of screens, which is a bit of a limited route tree, but the dude can flat out run away from guys. Tez Walker is really interesting. Only played in 7 games due to I think NCAA transfer violations or some weird thing. 41 receptions, 699 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns. He's very interesting because he does not play well versus contact, and he in man coverage and especially press coverage can negate him a ton. But he has a good contested catch ability and good hands as well. He had 58.3 contested catch rate. But at the but at the Senior Bowl especially, really kind of showed he really likes to try to just grab the ball with one hand instead of trying to basket it. But the athletic traits are super there. 4.36 40 time and a 9.86 RAS score, as well as being a true 6'4" receiver and 193 pounds. So we've got some really nice tools. But then you got Ricky Parasol, who is 6'1", 190. 6'1", 189 pounds. He had 65 receptions, 965 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns out of Florida. However, this dude has, again, really good hands. I don't think his contested catch rate was super well, but he had arguably the best catch all year with that one-hander over 4 defenders. He also has good athleticism, a more impressive route tree than I would have suspected for him. As well as a 9.78 RAS score. My boy Frozen Football really likes Ricky Parasol, and I would agree. I do have him in the second round. And then Jalen Polk, I have rounding out the second round as well. He arguably has the best hands in the class. He comes down with a ton of crazy catches. He's got great body control as well as having 69 receptions, 1,159 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns, 9.46 relative athletic score. He's not young. He's 22nd, but he is a redshirt sophomore. As well as being 6'1", 203 pounds. But again, maybe not the best route tree, maybe not the best athletic traits. However, comes down with a ton of crazy catches. Has great hands and has good body control, just flipping his body 180, similar to what Rome Odunze would do. Then you're going to move on to Javon Baker. Again, I see this all the time. Hands. But he was a crazy productive receiver at UFC. 52 receptions, but 1,139 receiving yards, and had a 3.2 yards per route run, as well as being one of the most efficient wide receivers. I don't know which metric it was, but I see on Twitter all the time, Javon Baker, biggest sleeper in the class. It's like he's the only receiver with like 500 plus yards after catch, and this something deep yards, and blah, blah, blah. A whole bunch of metrics. But Baker is, again, a contested catch guy. He is also great through contact, 6'1", 202 pounds, as well as being incredibly efficient and was really dominant at UCF. 3.21 yards per route run, super huge red or green flag for Baker. Then you're going to go to the little smaller guys. We've got a few ones. The next couple of guys are more of smaller guys. Roman Wilson, 5'10", 185 pounds. But I thought the Senior Bowl really displayed this. He's got great short and intermediate separating ability, great route tree, great ankle flexion and fluidity to his route running. He really separates well as being great after the catch. Saw that at Michigan a ton, and also he had 12 touchdowns last year, as well as one in the. He didn't have one in the national championship, but he did have one against Alabama. Also having a 4.39 40 time, which is a huge boost. Great, very quick separator and quick off of the line of scrimmage. Good after the catch as well. Good speed, like Roman Wilson. And then you got Malik Washington, another shorter guy, 5'8", 191 pounds. Bit older at 23 and a redshirt senior. But this dude, one of the most productive guys in the class. 110 receptions, which I think that's the most I don't know if that was the most in the FBS, but that's the most in the 2024 class. 1,426 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns. Dude is crazy productivity, but also even though he was short at 5'8", he had a 64% contested catch rate, as well as having a 92.4 receiving grade, a 4.47 40 time, good athlete. He got fed so much at Virginia. 110 receptions is a huge bonus. Gets open quickly. Good route tree as well. And good short and intermediate quickness as well. And then for Malachi Corley, Corley is just one of the most interesting players in this draft class. Because Western Kentucky used him as such an interesting, different, unique receiver, because he had a 5.5 average depth of target, which is that's unheard of, to have a receiver have that low of an average depth of target and have 79 receptions, 984 receiving yards, and 11 touchdowns. When you really look at Malachi Corley, it's just a bunch of really short catches or short plays, screens, like bubble screens, or just like I forgot what they're like, zero routes, which is like a one your release and then you just try to catch it. He I mean, just flat out is really good after the catch, and he's kind of like a bowling ball type of player, 5'11", 210 pounds. With that, and he really looks like a running back. He's got the size of a running back. He's got the yards after contact. He's kind of built like a running back, but as a wide receiver. But obviously, the route tree was just non-existent really with him because it was just really short routes, and then just kind of try to go after the catch. So we'll need to develop a route tree at the NFL level, and it would just be really interesting and strange how an NFL team would try to use him. And then you got Jermaine Burton, who's also another really interesting player because he only had like 79 yards after catch, which is insane. But then he had like a 17 or yards per catch in the 20s. He was just a huge chunk play guy at Bama. Also a good separator, good speed as well. 39 receptions to 798 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. It's such a wild distribution because you got 39 receiving yards, but then you got the huge, I mean, he had a ton of yards per catch, as well as being 6 foot, 196 pounds, 9.54 relative athletic score, which is good as well. And then moving on to the fourth round guys, you've got Jalen McMillan. Again, great route tree. He did have an injury in 2023, which made his numbers look like 45 receiving yards, 559, or 45 receptions, 559 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns. Missed a couple of games. Did play in the playoffs. However, in 2022, he was the number 2 receiver at Washington. Great route runner, good separator, and a short and intermediate guy. And then for Jacob Cowing is, again, smaller receiver, 5'8", 168 pounds, and he's 23 and a redshirt senior, so he is a bit up there in age. He has a lot of experience, but he was a fun. I really liked seeing him at Arizona. Obviously, wasn't the one. He was more of the slot. McMillan was that number 1 guy, really, but Cowing, separator, a big short separator guy, one of the better receivers in the slot. Obviously, 90 receptions, 848 receiving yards, 13 touchdowns. Very productive at Arizona, but the size kind of negates me a little bit from him because he'll need to fight through a little bit more traffic in the slot. But Jamari Thrash, moving on to him out of Louisville. He's another similar with the next couple of guys. We're getting a little older with the receivers. 23 years old, a redshirt senior, 5'11", 188 pounds, 63 receptions, 858 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns at Louisville. The thing about Jamari Thrash is he's a start and stop guy. He's gonna kill people on, he's going to really hurt people with the start and go routes. It's like start or go routes are gonna be really good for him. Comebacks or curl routes are really where Jamari Thrash thrives. It's just kind of more of the drops that are really negating me from putting him higher because he had an 11% drop rate, which is high. And then moving on to Johnny Wilson, again, I could say the same thing about the drop rate, but I'll get to that in a second. Really unique receiver. He's 6'6", 231 pounds. You would think that's more of like a tight end, a little bit of like a light tight end slot kind of guy, but he played primarily at the X, and he's 23 years old and a redshirt junior. 41 receptions, 617 receiving yards, only 2 touchdowns, which is so strange, but his RAS score was helped a bunch. He ran in the 4.5s, but his relative athletic score was helped so much because he's such a huge receiver that it was in the 9.8s, in the 98th percentile. But I'm really not as high on Johnny Wilson, kind of at all. There's a possibility I end up moving him to the 5th round as a 5th round grade, but I think I'll probably stick at the 4th. He has a high drop rate at 10.9%, which is high, especially for, his stature, and he's also really not the best at the catch point because he tries to be so finesse at the catch point. He's not super imposing at the catch point, which is so crazy for what you look on his size on paper. He looks smaller in game. He doesn't truly feel like a 6'6" receiver. He really feels like more of like a six flat kind of guy. Just kind of just not playing through contact the best, not doing the best at the catch point. Doesn't have the best route tree. Obviously, he's not the fastest or the quickest. It takes him a bit to move. But Johnny Wilson he's a very interesting prospect. And then Brandon Rice, the same thing I could say about him a little bit is he doesn't look really his size, 6'2", 208 pounds. He looks like he's 6 foot flat on tape and in game. Again, his stats: 45 receptions, 791 receiving yards, 12 touchdowns. I think he was the true one at USC last year. I know Taj Washington right behind him has a bit more receiving yards, but Brandon Rice was the main guy who was targeted in the red zone. He had 136 passer rating when targeted, which is really good. But the main thing about Brandon Rice is he doesn't do anything elite. Doesn't have elite quickness, doesn't have elite short area ability. The route tree is a bit limited. He's not the fastest. He's not, the best at the catch point. He's just kind of consistent. And I think that's good enough to be in the 4th round. Had a solid Senior Bowl, but I would think he would be a 4th round projected kind of guy, maybe a 5th. And then Taj Washington. I'll go a little faster for these guys because I do want to, not make this video too long. But Taj Washington was the next guy. Was the most productive receiver at USC, 59 receptions, 1,062 receiving yards, and a 3.6 yards per route run, which is really good, as well as only having 1 drop. And he had a ton of yards after the catch and was a very good explosive guy at USC, but he can't play through contact and cannot come down with contested catches because he's only 5'9", 174 pounds. So that is but he is an explosive guy. And then Aeneas Smith, 5'9", 190 pounds, 53 receptions, 795 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. Bit unproductive and a bit smaller. However, he does have some special teams positivity with being a good punt returner. Just kind of a solid guy. I might end up moving Cornelius Johnson above him, who is another very, very. He's a kind of I guess I'll start with this. He's 6'2", 212 pounds, but he looks really big, and that's kind of supported by his 81% contested catch rate. He came down with, I think, 8 out of 11 contested catch opportunities. Great hands as well as being a good athlete. Very surprising that he ran a 4.44 at the 40 time at the combine and a 9.89 RAS score. Really interesting, but again, 23 years old, redshirt senior, very, very, very limited route tree. Joshua Cephas, I have as a 6 flat. He's 6'3", 185 pounds, a bit of a thinner, taller guy. Again, 23 years old, redshirt senior, but he did have good productivity, 89 receptions, 1,151 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns. Only had 1 drop at UTSA, but again, the competition at UTSA is a bit rough, or a bit not as good as the FBS, of course. Or no, they're in the FBS. They're in the Conference USA. I forgot where exactly they were. And then Luke McCaffrey at Rice. This is the brother to Christian McCaffrey. 6'1", 198 pounds. Older, of course, at 23 years old, but 992 receiving yards and 13 touchdowns. But he's a bit strange, because he had an 87.2 passer rating when targeted, which to me means a bit more of it doesn't separate as efficiently. However, Luke McCaffrey, I could learn more about him up to this point, but I did see him in the Senior Bowl Senior Bowl practices. He looked pretty solid, and then with the combine, he looked again pretty solid. But I did not watch any Rice games over the last year, so I would learn more about Luke McCaffrey. But then Anthony Gould, smaller guy, 5'8", 174 pounds, and then you have only 2 touchdowns as well, 718 receiving yards, and an 8.3% drop rate. Doesn't play through contact the best. However, is just kind of like a quick guy. And also a 4.39 40 time, which makes sense. Quicker guy on tape. Jalen Colker is one of the most hyped guys in the class. I could continue to move Colker up as I continue to just go through the draft process. 59 receptions, 1,039 receiving yards, and 15 touchdowns. Also, 89.8 PFF grade and a 3, or no, I'll get to that later. You have those stats: 6'1", 208 pounds. Also good at the catch point, but dominated Holy Cross competition. You know, not they're playing the FCS. I actually know people that go to Holy Cross, but major red flag for me. 3.51 RAS score. I think that was one of the worst out of the wide receiver group, which is, you know, that's a red flag to me. But then Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint, the Georgia receiver, 35 receptions, which is really low because Georgia doesn't pass a ton. 535 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns. Did have 0 drops and a 63% contested catch rate. But the production was just super low, and he's not the best at separating. Isaiah Williams is productive, 82 receptions, 1,055 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns. But I have 2 big red flags with him. 4.63 40 time, and he's not very fast on tape. I did watch some Illinois when I was going over Jason Newton, and then only 21% contested catch rate. Xavier Weaver was really hyped at Colorado, 908 receiving yards to 4 touchdowns. There are, again, 2 big red flags for me here. 23 contested catch rate and a 1.73 yards per route run, which tells me he's not very efficient. Also came into Colorado as 23-year-old redshirt senior. Jordan Whittington had not as productive, obviously, was just the wide receiver 3 behind behind Adonai Mitchell. Only 42 receptions, 505 receiving yards, 1 touchdown. A lot of his routes were just really short as well. He's also 24 years old. And then I'm going to move on to my last guy, Devon Vele. I saw him a ton because I worked for PFF, so I did data on 2 Utah games in the past, so I did see him a ton. Big guy, 6'4", 203 pounds. But a little bit the biggest thing about him is on productivity, and he can't really separate. Only 43 receptions, 593 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns. But he did run a 4.47 40 time, but he is, I think, one of the worst separators just because he's a bit of a sluggish. He moves a bit sluggishly. But we're going to be moving on to the tight end class. I am going to go a bit faster with the tight end class because it's just not as good as the clear and away golden group of this class with the wide receivers. I'm 32 minutes into this video. But try to get this done before the 45-minute mark. Brock Bowers is my favorite prospect in this class, very easily. I mean, I think he's the best tight end prospect I've ever seen. I think he was arguably better than Kyle Pitts. In the last 3 years at the college football level, he led all tight ends in yards per route run. He was the highest graded tight end. I think it was the highest graded tight end in 2022. He had 900 yards in 2022. Also, 2-time national champion. 6'3", 243 pounds. There were a big question mark about his weight and his strength and his blocking ability at the FBS level. I agree with the blocking part. I don't think he's a very plus blocker, but I also don't think he's a thin tight end, and he can't play in line. Because 243 pounds is heavier than some of these other tight ends on this list. Did have a minor injury this year, so he only played, I think, 10 games, 56 receptions, 714 yards, and 6 touchdowns. But again, he still led the FBS in yards after catch. Also great through contact. He had a 70% contested catch rate in 2022. Great hands, good route running as well. And this dude's a fast receiver. Again, he didn't participate at the combine, but he probably would have ran within the 4.4s. He flat out runs away from guys. I think that Brock Bowers is the 3rd best player in this class. And then for Jatavion Sanders, again, this dude's a really good player. He's definitely within my top 50. He had 6'3", 245 pounds, 45 receptions, 682 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. But he ran a 4.69 40 time, and he had 0 drops in 2023, which is a huge sign because he has great hands, great after the catch, good in the red zone. And I think he's the best inline tight end, even though he can play as more of an H-back. He's got good speed. overall, I think is definitively the tight end 2. And the gap, even though I have like a whole point and plus difference between the two, I don't think there is a ton of difference. I think Ja'Tavion Sanders still securely goes within the second round of the draft. Ben Sinnott is the best, just overall, as you could imagine, like a tight end, because he can do pretty much everything a tight end can do. He's a really stocky build at 6'3", 250 pounds. Had 49 receptions, 676 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. He's just a really overall great, just tight end, as you can imagine. He's a good receiver. He's got good speed, good athleticism, 9.79 RAS score. Also a good blocker, can be an inline guy. I think he had a 72 pass blocking grade, a 78 run blocking grade. Was the only tight end in this class with a 75 receiving grade, or 75 plus PFF receiving grade, and a 75 plus blocking grade. And also good at the catch point. Solid route runner, even though he moves a little bit maybe worse than guys like Brock Bowers, is not as fast as him or Sanders. Overall, just securely, again, the tight end 3 in this class. Overall, just a solid, very solid tight end. Cade Stover, similarly as well. 6'4", 47 pounds. Bit older as a 23-year-old, but he did have 41 receptions, 576 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns. Again, a guy with 0 drops and a 60% contested catch rate. Great hands, but he moves a lot more sluggishly. And also not super defined or smooth route tree. But, again, another solid tight end here. Dallin Holker is very, very interesting. He is 6'3", 241 pounds, but he looks a lot bulkier on film. 24 years old, so a very older guy, much older guy. But he did have 64 receptions, 767 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns. Dallin Holker was the most productive tight end through the air this year. And I think he arguably could be one of the best receivers. I mean, good at the catch point, really good after the catch, good speed. Or not good speed, but decent speed. He really is like a 4.7 guy. It moves a bit. It takes his gears to get going. Not the quickest guy, really, and also not the greatest blocker. But because he really played receiver so much at Colorado State, he played like all the time, either in the slot or he played on the boundary. He was more of a wide receiver that played tight end. But the only negative for me is he does move sluggishly, and he's not the quickest receiver. But he's a great receiver. But a bit of a sluggish mover. Completely different is Theo Johnson, who is a complete turnaround from Dallin Holker, because he is 6'6", 239 pounds. Not productive really at Penn State. They're only 34 catches, 341 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns. But he was a 4.65 runner at the 40 time at a 9.98 official RAS score. I mean, this dude is also, it's shown on tape, athletic. This dude can make some crazy acrobatic catches. He made one at the Senior Bowl. He made a crazy catch in practice or something. But Theo Johnson he's huge. He really is big, and it looks like it a ton. But not the most productive. Didn't have the greatest production, but athlete. And then you got Tanner McLaughlin. 6'5", 243 pounds. He does look really tall on tape. 45 receptions, 528 receiving yards, and then 4 touchdowns, 9.38 RAS score. Another solid receiver. Not the greatest blocker, but another solid receiver. Good routes. And then you moving on to Jaheim Bell, who is, I might be out on Jaheim Bell. He's one of the weirdest tight ends I've ever seen. 6'3", 241 pounds, even though it looks like he's a lot shorter. He really looks like he's 6'1". And 39 receptions, 503 receiving yards, yes. Good after the catch, and a very quick wide receiver. Very quick tight end. He really is an H-back, like a pure H-back. Think of guys like Jonnu Smith. But I can't ignore the drops, man. The drops that he makes are atrocious. He does not have the best hands. 9.3 drop rate is just very concerning. I don't know. Jaheim Bell is such a wildly like he's not really a tight end. He's really an H back. Think of like a Jonnu Smith. That's kind of what Jaheim Bell is. And then for Jared Wiley, 6'6", 249 pounds, he's more of a traditional inline or receiving tight end. 47 receptions, 520 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns, red zone guy, good hands, also good athlete, 9.53 RAS score. And then AJ Barner is a true blocking tight end because he just is not the best receiver. I think he really is a pure blocker at the next level. 22 receptions, and a ton of those were on bootlegs. You had 200, and he was also the tight end, really like 2. After I forgot the freshman Colston. I forgot his Colston Loveland, who was the actual tight end 1 at Michigan. 249 receiving yards, only 1 touchdown. A lot of them were on bootlegs. A lot of his receptions were on bootlegs. But he did have an 81.4 run blocking grade, which is why he's really a run blocker, a blocking tight end. But 7.2 career drop rate, 6'6", 251 pounds. Everything just kind of points to that he's a blocking guy. Erick All has some really interesting potential because he was a Michigan tight end that had a really good year in 2019, bunch of injuries, transferred to Iowa this year, and it wasn't very great. He had another injury. 6'4", 252 pounds, 23. Again, had a red shirt due to injury, and then he transferred. 21 receptions, 299 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns. But he had a 16% drop rate, which is such a bad... I mean, that's a huge amount of drops for his very limited opportunity. But he has some good athleticism, but the injuries are also really negating him. Jack Westover, shorter tight end at 6'2", 243 pounds, 24 years old guy, 46 receptions, 433 reception yards, only had 1 drop, but he was not the most productive guy. 1.34 yards per route run. Westover is solid. I do have him in the 7th round. Same thing with Trey Knox. I'm not very high on him either. 37 receptions, 2 touchdowns, 1.28 yards per route run. Again, nothing super special about Trey Knox. Tip Raymond, really good combine guy. Had a 993 RAS score. Really had some good combine numbers, but 19 receptions, 203 receiving yards at Illinois, who was not a good passing yards. He's really sluggish at 6'4", 271 pounds. He's huge. And I mean 0.84 yards per route run, which is, he's just not really he would be more of just a kind of blocking guy, or kind of just a kind of a player to put there because he's just so heavy. He could be like a 6th offensive lineman if you think about it, or a big fullback or something. I don't know. I just do not think he has receiving ability maybe at the NFL level. And then Brevin Spanford. This dude was one of the worst tight ends in all of college football. I know he had a touchdown in the Senior Bowl, but again, 6'4", 260 pounds. He has so many red flags. 24 years old. And I mean, 45.9 receiving grade and a 26 drop rate. 26% drop rate. I mean, I don't know how you could I don't know how you can draft Brevin Spanford. But that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you guys, of course, check out my draft board on the Patreon. If you guys want the link, it's free, obviously. And I'll be continuing to update this throughout the draft process. But let me know any receivers or tight ends that I should add. I think I might be capped out on these 2 positions. I have 35 receivers. But that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one.